All right, Yavosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilsim Mishpach of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shemar Droshos this year as a zchus for Besoros Tavos for all of Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Shmuel and Rabin Karapkin, Le'ilu Nishmas Shmuel's father, Lipa Ben Yecheskel HaKohen Zichron Livracha, a week of learning sponsor, Hillary Jacobs in Kent, in memory of her daughter, Shifra Zichron Livracha Bas Chanadina, and our Daf Yomi sponsor for today, Bennett Goldberg, in memory of his mother, Peggy Goldberg, Fega Rezel Bas Reb Yaakov. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families, Ein Chama, all of those in the refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Nishmar Chushli Merit Hashem bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol Maaseh Yedeihem. But with that, let us know we have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. A lot to do. Today's daf is Chaf Aleph 21. We are picking up Emirat Hashem on Chaf Amud Beis 20b, 16 lines down from the top. So again, I'm hoping that Emirat Hashem also have a little bit of time today to delve a little bit into the Rambam, because the Rambam actually in the beginning of Hilchos Shevuos, literally again, Parak Aleph, gets a lot into these sugyas, and I think provides a tremendous amount of clarity, which is going to be sorely needed. I also want to clarify something from yesterday. I think I misspoke and I mixed up Neder and Shvuah yesterday. So remember again, Rashi made reference to the idea, and I want to thank Mr. Alan Steinmetz of New York for Hashem calling me yesterday, leaving me a message about this. So I have to go. I didn't go back and listen to the recording, but I just want to clarify regardless. We spoke about, Rashi pointed out yesterday, the chiluk between a neder and a shvuah. And so just to clarify, because I'm not sure how I said it yesterday, a shvuah is an iser gavra, right? A shvuah ultimately creates a prohibition upon the individual. A neder creates a prohibition upon the chefza, right? That's why again, when you make a shvuah, ultimately again the lashon of shvuah is shvuah shelo ochal kikar zu. Like the subject is I will not eat, as opposed to lashon of nedarim of kikar zu alai. So again, we're not really getting into this topic right now. We'll get to this topic, but in the event that I said it incorrectly yesterday, just wanted to clarify. All right, both say 16 lines down from the top. Ki asur Rav Dimi, thank you to Mr. Simons. Ki asur Rav Dimi, Am Rav Yochanan, ochal v'lo ochal sheker. So both say, so now remember again, our topic is Shevuos bitui. Our topic is, remember again, the specific type of shvuah called a definitive or declarative Shvuah. A person is making a statement. So now Rav Dimi comes along and says something very interesting. Ochal v'lo ochal. So let's say again, he says is sheker. Now what does that mean? Shvuah sheker. What does that mean? I take a shvuah. I will eat something, or I won't eat something. So let's just take a simple example of this. I swear that I won't go ahead and eat this loaf today. And then what ends up happening? I eat the loaf today. I eat it. So now what? What have I done? So obviously I've been in violation of my shvuah, but Rabbi Yochanan comes along and says that is what's called a shvuas sheker. That's called a shvuas sheker. That's called again a false. You've taken now a false oath. A false oath. And again, the prohibition, the lav against the shvuas sheker is from here. Lo sishavu b'shmi sheker. Do not swear in my name for falsehoods. Achalti v'lo achalti. What happens if a person says, I swear that I ate the loaf, but he really didn't eat the loaf? So remember again, in Rabbi Yochanan's model, a future, right, a prospective shvuah that you violate is called a shvuas sheker. In his model, a retrospective shvuah, I swear that I didn't eat the loaf, but in fact I ate the loaf, shav. That's called again a shvuas shav. Right, a shvuah in vain. So Rabbi says, so again, Rabbi Yochanan making this very interesting, and the lav is from here. Lo sisa Hashem Hashem elokecha lashav. Again, Asar Debros, do not take the Lord's name in vain. So Rabbi says, so very, very important model over here. So again, if I go ahead and I violate a shvuas bitui that is prospective, future-oriented, that is called a shvuas sheker. If I go ahead and I violate a retrospective shvuah, I swear that I did not eat the loaf, but I did eat the loaf, that's called a shvuas shav. Now, what's the difference between a shvuas sheker and a shvuas shav? So of course, on the most basic level, it's just the nature of the isser. right? Where is the Isser derived from? We'll see whether or not there are other chilukim as well. Now, we'll say you already know because we've lived this before, that obviously this is going to be hotly contested because we saw a dramatically different definition for a Shevuos shav beforehand, right? Lishpa l'shana says hayadua, to try to go ahead and change something that everyone knows to be true. So again, just keep that in the back of your mind, but this is Rabbi Yochanan's model. Konamos are nedarim. So what about a konam? Oh, so if you make a neder and then you violate it, over bebal yachal below yachal dvaro. So again, you violate the lav. Do not profane your word. So the Gemara says lo yachal dvaro meisvei. All right, so this is Rabbi Yochanan's model. Now I'm going to raise the kasha meisvei shav v'sheker echad hein. Oh, the Brisa says another Brisa that says shav and sheker are the same thing. Effectively the same thing, which is another way of saying that lemaisa, there's no difference whether you violate a prospective shvuah or retrospective shvuah. You're in violation. You will call it a shav, a sheker. Who cares? It's all the same thing. The Gemara says, "My love lememra, my love, me the shav l'shavar af sheker nami l'shavar." Now, the fact that the Brisa is saying that shav and sheker are the same things, is they're not saying in the same way that shvuas shav is retrospective. So too shvuas sheker is retrospective as well. Almos, what do you see from here? Achalti v'lo achalti shekerhu. So you see from here that if you go ahead and you make a shvuah, I swear that I ate the loaf, but you really didn't eat the loaf, that's called the shvuah sheker. To which the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. My area, hakidisim, hakidisim. No. Let's go back to what we said before. In reality, shvuah shav and shvuah sheker are two different things. Two different animals. But what does it mean when it says my davar echad? What does it mean when it says that shav and sheker are davar echad? So the Gemara says my davar echad hein debedibor echad ne'emru. It means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave over these halachas, they were said over in the same breath. Bedibor echad ne'emru. Where else do we see this? Kidisanya zachar v'shamar. Bedibor echad ne'emru, masha'in ha'yachal ha'peh ledaber, u'masha'in ha'ozin yachal l'shmoa. So Zachar v'Shamar by Shabbos, by Hilchos Shabbos, Zachar v'Shamar were given over, Bedibor echad. Chash Baruch Hu literally, literally said both of them in the same breath. Something that the human mouth cannot articulate, and that the ear can't really hear. In other words, you can't really hear these two things at once. So the Gemara says, so Bishlama Hassan B'dibur Echad. So the Gemara wants to suggest that that's what it means when it says Sheker and Shav B'dibur Echad Nemru. Ultimately, again, what does that mean? It means that Halacha L'Maisa, or say Sheker v'Shav Echad Hu. It means the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave over Sheker and Shav B'dibur Echad in one utterance. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. So I understand why by Shabbos, Zachar and Shamar were given over in the same utterance. Why? So the Gemara says, Kidrav Adabar Ava. Noshim Chayavas Bekidush Hayom Dvar Torah. Because remember again, what does Rav Adabar Ava say? Women are biblically obligated in Kiddush. Women are biblically obligated in Kiddush. So the Gemara says, Da Amar Kra, Zachar v'Shamar, because remember again, Zachar and Shamar was said in one utterance. So therefore again, halacha l'maisa we say, whoever is obligated in Shmira. Now remember again, Shamar as Shabbos HaKadosh refers to what? Malachas. Malachas, the prohibitions of Shabbos. The fact that Zachar refers to the positive commandments of Shabbos. And therefore again, this leads the Gemara to say that halacha l'maisa, whoever is obligated in Shamar, in the prohibitions of Shabbos, ultimately is chayiv in the positive mitzvos of Shabbos. That's why, again, you have, we'll call it speak like that articulative simultaneity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he went ahead and he said both of them at once to create a binding halachic paradigm. Therefore, again, women who have an obligation ultimately, again, in Shmira, ultimately have an obligation in Sira. We'll say that's why, by the way, technically speaking, right, remember again, this creates a whole fascinating discussion that women are just as obligated in Kiddush as men are. So the Mishnah Berurah has a whole thing, something very interesting. Mishnah Berurah says, when you come home on Shabbos night, let's say assuming that you went to shul, your wife didn't go to shul. So which means that you said Vayichulu already. If you said Vayichulu already, then you fulfilled your biblical obligation of Kiddush. Now the issue just is that if you fulfilled your biblical obligation of Kiddush, so you're still going to make Kiddush ala kos midrabanan. The problem is that you are a darais. You are only chayiv midrabanan, but your wife is chayiv midaraisa. How could a drabanan be motzi a daraisa? So the Mishnah really gives an interesting eitzah. He says, say good Shabbos to your wife, right? She'll say good Shabbos back to you. Technically speaking, one fulfills Kiddush Midaraisa with a declarative statement of good Shabbos. I mean, again, hopefully you don't need the Mishnah Berurah to tell you to say good Shabbos to your wife, right? But Lamaisa, what that does is that relegates both of you to the same status, which also will say, by the way, technically means that a woman could make Kiddush and be motzi her family. Now, the Gemara has some choice words for that, right? The Gemara says, Tava alav me'ira, that a curse should come upon a man who relies on his wife to be motzi him in Kiddush, because according to Chazal, what it does is it represents a heightened level of ignorance, right? If a man doesn't know how to do that in order to be motzi his family, so again, it represents a level of ignorance, which the Gemara felt was incredibly shameful for the man. But again, on a technical level, their obligation is the same. Where does that come from? That comes from this Gemara over here. Since Shamar and Zachar were said in the same utterance, therefore creates simultaneous or duplicative obligation. But by Shevuos, Shav, and Sheker, why do I need Shav and Sheker said in the same utterance? So you're right. So rather, when the Brisa says that Shav and Sheker are davar echad, what it means is they have shared liability. That the same way that you'll go ahead and you'll get malchus for Sheker, so too you'll get malchus for a Shevuos Shav. Okay. And I will say, by the way, what's interesting is, remember, we haven't really been talking about malchus. What have we been talking about? We've been talking about karbanos, right? So where does malchus come up in the world of Shevuos? Intentional violation, right? Whereas the karban will be, we'll talk about this more, but here in this context, malchus will come for intentional violation of a Shevuah. Incredible. You should just know the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh has a beautiful idea. He says this idea of kol shi yeshno b'shmira, yeshno b'zechira. He says something amazing. He says any person who is careful with his neshama, person who's careful to watch himself from Aveira, to watch himself from just, we'll say every single time we commit, and we know this from our own experiences, every single time I commit an Aveira, I'm fundamentally changing myself, right? It's like a shtickle, like rolling in the mud. I'm still good, I'm still holy, I'm still beautiful, I'm still wonderful, but l'maisa, I'm rolling in the mud a little bit. And what that does is it compromises the self. And the problem when I compromise the self is it has an impact on all of the other appendages of my ruchnius, right? So we know this. If I commit an Aveira, my davening is not the same. My learning is not the same. Nothing is the same because I've been compromised. Again, Baruch Hashem, the good news is I can always rebound, but I'm compromised. The kli, the utensil, the vessel is compromised. So the Baal Shem Tov says sometimes and this resonates, I think, with particular importance for us. This is one of the hardest things that we often encounter in our Yiddishkeit is retention of our learning. Nothing speaks to a daf Yomi Jew like this, right? We love the daf, but one of the most frustrating parts of the daf is retention. So the Baal Shem Tov says, so what's the secret to retention? Get ready for this. Kol sheyeshno b'shmira, yeshno b'zechira. Whoever is careful with his self, whoever is careful with his kli, if I'm careful to be shomer, I'm shomer, shmira, I'm careful that I try not to commit averos. I try to keep myself in a state of spiritual purity. I try to go to make sure that my personalistic utensil is fit for use. I try to avoid whatever things that are compromised for that. Yeshna b'shmira, yeshna b'schira. I'll have an easier time retaining my learning. Why? Because the personalistic kli, the personalistic utensil, is in the right state. So incredible, right? We're all looking for all of these memory tools, all these different things, and the Rebbe says, meanwhile, just stay away from chait. Just yeshno b'shmira. Just try to preserve your own personal spirituality by not sullying myself with all of the negative influences of chait, and ultimately, zechira, remembrance and retention of what I've learned will ultimately follow. Incredible, just incredible. So the Gemara says, klape layo. I could say this just the opposite. Rather say the same way that you get malchus for a Shevuos Sheker, if you intentionally violate it. So too, again, if you intentionally make a Shevuos Sheker, so too you'll get Malkus on a Shav. So the Gemara says, Pshita, that's obvious. High love of a high love. Of course, again, essentially, now I will say, I just want to point out, remember, we have yet to create agreed upon definitions for sheker and shav. So remember again, so far all we have is Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan said that essentially sheker is prospective, shav is retrospective. So again, we'll get into this more, but the Gemara says, of course they're both going to be chayv and malchus, because if you do either of them, you're in violation of a lav. What would you have thought? Like Rabbi said, Abaye lo yinake klal. So I'll say, I might have thought like this. The pasuk says, when it comes to when it comes to a Shevuos Shav, lo sisa Hashem Elokecha lashav, ki lo yinake Hashem. I might have thought that for a Shevuos Shav, there's no cleansing. Lo yinake. The pasuk says you will not be cleansed. Now, if I'm not cleansed, that means what? There's no malchus. Because you must remember again, what's the role of punishments in Judaism? They're supposed to be cathartic and cleansing. So if the pasuk says that by a Shevuos Shav there is no nikoi, right? There is no cleansing. Maybe there's no malchus. To which the Gemara says, "Top of Chaf Aleph and Aleph, Kamash Malon Kiddush Shanilei." Ultimately, the Gemara says, "No, it's as he responded." Now we'll see the response later on. But Lamaisa, it's to say that there is halocha Lamaisa malchus for a Shevuos Shav as well. The other possibilities we could say, Kishem. So we're just trying to figure out the brisa where the brisa says that Shav and Sheker are echad. They're one thing. So what does this mean? Kishem shemevi karban al Sheker, kach mevi karban al Shav. Or maybe the other possibility is like this, that Allah, so when the Brisa said that Shav and Sheker are one thing, that maybe what it means to say is like this, the same way that you will bring a carbon, remember again, as an Olav Yored on a Sheker, you'll also bring an Olav Yored on a Shav. But Rabbi Akiva, he d'mechayiv l'sha'avar kilahaba, and a reflexive view of Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva holds that there's liability for a retrospective Shvuah, just like there is for a prospective Shvuah. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, the Gemara is a kasha, Ezehu Shevuos Shav. Okay, so we'll say, so now we're getting into a very yesodistic machlokes about definitions. Definitions, right? Sheker is much easier. Sheker is much easier to define, because what's Sheker? What's Sheker? Anything that's not true, right? Anything that's not true. I swear I ate the loaf of bread. I didn't eat the loaf of bread. Or, I swear I will eat the loaf of bread today, and I don't eat it today. So that's very easy to measure. I lied. What's shav? Ezu hishvua shav, nishpa l'shanos as hayadu ali adam. So we'll say it's anything that tries to go ahead and change an established truth that is known to all. We saw this before earlier in the second. Look at Rashi. Nishpa l'hachlif. No, sorry. So now, yeah, that's sheker. So we'll say, so for example, again, remember Rashi's example beforehand? Rashi's example was, I swear that this is a man, when it's really a woman. Everyone knows that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, right? And therefore, again, if you try to go ahead and you swear to the contrary, that's called Shevuos Shav. I swear that this sefer is a car. Hey, so again, it doesn't. So that's Shevuos Shav. You're swearing about something that is an observable truth, and you're trying to change that reality. You cannot change an observable truth. That's called Shav. Now, both sides want to point out. Now this comes together a little bit better, because now Shav and Sheker are really two different dramatic categories. So remember, Sheker therefore could really be prospective or retrospective, and either way, it's a lie. It's a lie. Shav is something much more profound. Nishba l'shanos hasayadu. I'm trying to change something that is objectively and observably known. The Gemara goes on. He says, good. Shevuos Shaker. What's Shaker? So we'll say I'm on Chaf Aleph 21a, about 5 lines in. So the Gemara says, Shevuos Shaker, Nishba l'hachlif, is any shvuah that tries to change the truth. Rashi says, Nishba l'hachlif, l'shana says ha'emes, b'shvuaso, hainu l'sha'avar, kegon achalti v'lo achal, lo achalti v'achal. See, here it's interesting. The Gemara is suggesting that Nishba l'hachlif means any shvuah that is there to change a truth. Right? So for example, I swear I ate the loaf, but I didn't eat the loaf. Or I swore that I didn't eat the loaf, but I ate the loaf. Now what's interesting is, according to the Brisa here, once again, Shevuos Sheker is only retrospective. Only retrospective. So Kiyas Rabbi Yirmiyah, Am Rabbi Avo, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Achalti v'lo achalti Sheker. Retrospective shua, I swear that I ate, but I didn't eat, or I swear that I didn't eat and I ate. That's called a Shevuos sheker. Vaz harase, where's the lav from? Milo sishbu b'shmi sheker. Okay, it's an explicit lav. Don't lie when you swear. Ochal v'lo ochal. Now, what happens again if halacha l'maisa again? I make a prospective shua. I swear I will eat, but I did not eat. Then what's the halacha? Over bebal yachel dvaro. Ultimately, again, he violates lo yachal dvaro. Now, interestingly enough, the lashon of lo yachal dvaro, the Gemara is actually quoted in the context. Ish ki yidar neder laHashem, o ishava shvua le'asar yisrael nafsho lo yachal dvaro. So it's interesting because more often than not, nidarim, right, a neder is prospective. So here, interestingly enough, you have shvua mentioned in the context of neder. So the Gemara is suggesting, or these Rabban Rabbi Yochanan is suggesting that refers to a prospective type of shvuah that comes under the umbrella of lo yachal dvaro. Do not violate your word. Do not profane your word. Good. Ve'ezu shvuas shav. What's a shvuah shav? Nishba l'shano says hayadua. Hayadua la'adam. It's any shvuah that tries to change an established, observable truth. So as I said, just want to point out what happened over here. In this model, which is also quoting Rabbi Yochanan, is right. So again, what we have over here is essentially three different categories. There's Shevuos sheker. What's Shevuos sheker? Shevuos sheker is a retrospective shvuah. Right? When I say, in other words, that you violate. I swear that I ate the loaf, I didn't eat the loaf, that's called a Shevuos sheker. Category 2 is what he calls lo yachel. Lo yachel is prospective shvuos. Now, interestingly enough, he does not go ahead and give that like a different categorical name. He just calls that you're in violation of it. So I swear I will eat the loaf today, and I don't eat the loaf today, I'm in violation of lo yachel dvaro. And then category 3 is shvuas shav. And in shvuas shav, nishba l'shano says hayadua. I take something that is objectively, observably seen as a truth, and I go ahead and lie about it. Okay, those are our categories. Again, we'll see halacha l'maisa which categories we adopt. Amra Papa. So Rabbi Avo la beferish itmar el mechlala itmar. So Rabbi Papa says this statement of Rabbi Avo, which is the statement we just made over here, right? The statement of Rabbi Avo of these three different categories was not said explicitly, rather it was inferred. Where was it inferred? From here we go. The Gemara says the Amrav Idi bar Ava Amrav Amram Amrav Yitzchak Amrav Yochanan Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yosef Lili. Kol lo saseh shebatorah. Lav she'ish b'maisa lokin alav. Okay, so now this is one of these nice braises, a klaliistic brisa. So what do we say? Any lo saseh in the Torah, right? Any prohibition in the Torah is a lav she'ish b'maisa, right? A little bit back to our Makkah days. Any lav she'ish b'maisa. So any lav that has with it an action, what's the halacha? Lokin alav, you get malchus. Okay, straightforward, right? I eat a cheeseburger, that's malchus. It's a lav sheyesh bo maisa. Okay, so the Gemara says, v'she'im bo maisa. What if you do a lav, ultimately, again, that doesn't have a maisa? In lokin alav, you don't get malchus, and that is the general rule. Any lav she'ein bo maisa, ein lokin alav. There's no malchus for the prohibition or for the violation of such a lav. There are a number of exceptions. Chutz, number 1, min nishpa, swearing. Because remember, again, swearing has no maisa. Swearing falsely has no maisa. It's a dibor. But yet, nevertheless, again, there's going to be malchus for intentional violation. Meimar, right, which means tmura, substituting one sacrificial animal for another. Again, no technical maisa, but again, still malchus. Mekalel es chavero b'shem. Or you curse your friend, it's clearly not such a good friend, but you curse your friend with the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so we'll say, so these are the exceptions to the general. We have a principle. Principle is lav sheyesh bo maisa lokin alav, lav she'ein bo maisa ein lokin alav, with the exception of these cases. Now the Gemara goes through the cases. Nishba minalan. How do you know that if you swear? Right now, says so many cases where I swear and I either intentionally, falsely, or I intentionally violate the shvuah. How do I know that halacha l'maisa? There is malchus for such an act. Rabbi Yochanan Rashbi, Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Rashbi. Amakra lo sisa Hashem Hashem Elokecha lashav ki lo yinakeh. The pasuk says, "Do not take Hashem's name in vain, because you will not be cleansed. The Gemara says, Beis Din Shalmala ein minakinoso. What it means is, right, Beis Din Shalmala, the heavenly court, will not absolve you of this serious transgression. Aval Beis Din Shalmata malkin oso uminakin oso. But Beis Din Shalmata will in fact cleanse you. Now, both remember again, how does Beis Din Shalmata cleanse you? How do they cleanse you? Malchus. The punishment cleanses you. So the Gemara says, only a proper I don't understand. How do you know that? Maybe this is what the pasuk means to say. Lo yinake klal. Maybe what it means to say is like this. No. You will not be cleansed at all. Maybe that's what it means. Whereas maybe lo yinake means, no, if you take a shvuas shav, right? If you take an oath in vain, there's just ongoing culpability. You'll never be cleansed. Never be cleansed. Simar says, well, iksiv ki lo yinake kid'kamrit. If it would have just said lo yinake, then I would agree. No cleansing process. The tremendous severity of such a prohibition. The Gemara says, Hashta d'chsiv ki lo yinake Hashem. But that's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says, Lo sisa Hashem elokech al hashav ki lo yinake Hashem. Hashem will not cleanse you. Hashem will not cleanse you. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Hashem u'deina menakeh. Hashem doesn't absolve you. Aval Beis Din Shalmata malkin oso menakin oso. But the human court, the earthly court, will go ahead and give you malchus and will absolve you. Okay, so both say, so what do you see from here? This is case number one, that Shevuos Shav, Shvuah, ultimately, even though it's a lav she'in bo maisa, right? It's a lav, because remember, dibor is not a maisa, you still get malchus for intentional violation of your Shvuah. Okay, next. Ashkechan Shevuos Shav. So that's a Shevuos Shav. Which of us, again, remember, what's our definition of a Shevuos Shav? Let's assume that we're going with the latest definition of Rabbi Avo, which is Nishba l'shanos esayadua. You're trying to change something that is a clearly observable truth that everyone knows. Shevuos Sheker minalan. How do you know about a Shevuos Sheker? Now remember again, what's going to be our definition of Sheker? What's our definition of Sheker? We'll assume right now that Sheker is either, again, you're lying. Prospectively or retrospectively, either way, you're lying. How do I know that a Shevuos Sheker also gets malchus if you intentionally violate? You intentionally do a Shevuos Sheker. Minalan. So Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar Lashav Shtei Pamim. The pasuk itself says Lashav twice. Right, it's again Lo Sisa Hashem Elokech Lashav Ki Lo Yinake Hashem Es Asher Yisa Shmo Lashav. So it says Shav twice. The Gemara says in the Shevuos Shav. So again, I only need one Shav for Shevuos Shav. What does the other? So what do I do with the other one? Tenei Inyan l'Shevuos Sheker. Give it to Shevuos Sheker, and to say that what just like a Shevuos Shav is Chayiv Malchus, so to a Shevuos Sheker is Chayiv Malchus as well. Incredible. V'havi bar Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo wondered about this. He said, Hai Shevuos Sheker hechidami. What is the case of Shevuos Sheker? So also, remember again, just right now, definitionally, we're just trying to figure out ultimately, again, what all of this is. So, Hai Shevuos Sheker hechidami. Ilema Shevuos shelo ochal va'achal. If you want to say that it's a case of, I swear that I will not eat. That's prospective Shevuah. I swear that I will not eat, and I eat. It can't be because that's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. Okay, so we'll say, so again, it makes sense that that's going to get malchus, right? Why? Because again, we'll say that would fall under the normal rule that any lav sheyesh b'maisa is lokin alav. So that makes sense. So get malchus for it. Ve'ela da'amar shvuah. So remember again, just let's see what we're trying to do, right? The Brisa spells the principle. What's the principle? Kol lav sheyesh b'maisa lokin alav. In b'maisa in lokin alav. If you violate a prohibition, and the prohibition has an action attached to it, you get malchus. No action, no malchus, with the exception of a number of cases. Which case is an exception? Shevuah. So now we're trying to figure out the case of Shevuah that doesn't have a maisa and will get malchus. So if you're telling me that it's a prospective Shevuah, I swear that I won't eat, and I do eat, then of course it makes sense that I'll get malchus. So that why? Because I did an action. Ve'ela da'amar Shevuah she'ochal ve'lo achal. No, maybe it's the case of, I swear that I will eat, and I didn't eat. So the Gemara says, well, in that case, the Gemara says, hi, mi loka. Do you get malchus in that case? After all, v'ha itmar, but yet we learn, shvur she'ochal kikar zu hayom v'arayom v'lo achla. Listen to this. I swear that I'm going to eat this loaf of bread today, and I don't eat it today. The day goes by and I don't eat it. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both agree, ain't a loka. you do not get malchus in such a scenario. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Eina Loke. Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get malchus. Why? Mishum Dahavi Lav Shein B'Maisa. Because we'll say again, if I swear that I'm going to eat and I don't eat, I can't get malchus. So that's Rabbi Yochanan says why? That's a Lav Shein B'Maisa. Right? There's no Maisa attached to it. So because there's no Maisa, therefore again I can't get malchus. V'cholav Shein B'Maisa. Ein Loken Alav. And any lav, ultimately, again, it doesn't have a maisi. Don't get malchus. Reish Lakish says, Ein Loke. Why? Mishum Dahavi Hasras Safek. Oh, we've seen this before, actually. Reish Lakish also agrees you won't get malchus. Why not? Hasras Safek. The Hasras Safek lo shmasar. And I was remembering we saw this before in Makis. Why is that called Hasras Safek? Because generally, again, Hasra has to be definitive and delivered within proximity to the commission of the act. Here, the issue is that what? I have the whole day in order to comply with my shvuah. So therefore, it's Asra suffix. Interestingly enough, both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish will agree, no malchus, but they agree for different reasons. So we'll say, so again, so what's going to be the case of shvuah, where it's a lav she'ein bo maisa, and I'm getting malchus? So again, remember, we'll say, if we're telling me that it's a case of, I swear I'm going to eat, and I don't eat, everyone agrees you don't get malchus in that case, either because of lav shein b'maisa or asra safek. So from Rabbi Abo says, I'll tell you the case. Tehei ba'achalti v'lo achalti. It must be the case of what? Of achalti v'lo. I swear that I ate, but in fact I lied. I didn't eat. So that would be a case ultimately again of a lav she'in bo maisa, but you would be chayiv malchus for a shvuas sheker. It's incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. So look at Rashi. Vam Rabbi Avo tehei hach shvuas sheker. The Rabbi Yochanan the Israbai milashav l'shav ba'achalti v'lo achalti. So we'll say, and by the way, now you begin to also understand this is Rabbi Avo, right? Now remember again, the reason we're in this whole thing is because Rabbi Avo made a statement before that ultimately again, achalti v'lo achalti is shvuas sheker. The Gemara then said Rabbi Avo didn't say this explicitly, he learned it by inference. Here's the inference. But it's looping back to the brisa that says that again, normally, lav sheyesh b'maisa malchus, lav she'in b'maisa in b'malchus. One of the exceptions to that rule is shvuah. What's the case of shvuah, where it's a lav she'ein b'maisa, but you'll still get malchus? I swear that I ate the loaf. I swear that I ate the loaf. I swear that I ate the loaf, but in fact, I didn't eat the loaf. See, we know that is a lav she'ein b'maisa, right? It turns out, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Like in other words, I swore falsely. It was a shvuah sheker. I swore that I ate the loaf, but it turns out I actually didn't do anything. Rabbi Abo says, oh, that's the case of malchus. Even though it's a lav shein b'maisa, that is going to be the case of malchus. The Gemara says, umayshna. So ultimately, again, so why is this case different? In other words, Rabbi say, if this is a lav, look, watch what just happened over here. We just said before that everyone agreed that in the case of I swear I will eat and I don't eat, everyone agrees there's no malchus in that case, right? Either because of lav shein b'maisa or asra safek. So the Gemara says, I don't understand why is this case of I swear that I ate when I didn't eat. So let me say it differently. Everyone agrees in the case of shvuah sha'ochal. I swear I will eat and I don't eat. Everyone agrees that what? No liability. Why not? Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Either because lav she'in b'maisa or asras safek. But bottom line is, everyone agrees that there's no liability. Now Rabbi Avo is coming along and saying that in this case of shvuah sha'achalti, I swore that I ate it, but I didn't eat it, that there is liability. But why? Why? That's also a lav she'in b'maisa. In other words, so why is there liability in that particular case? So the Gemara says, umayshna amarava beferish rib satora shvuas sheker dumya l'shav. Because the Torah explicitly equates shvuas sheker, which again in this case is this retrospective shvuah. I swear that I ate the loaf, but I didn't eat it. And the Torah explicitly compares this shvuah to a shvuas shav. Ma shav l'sha'avar, av sheker nami l'sha'avar. Just like Rabbi said. Now, by the way, a shvuas shav is inherently a retrospective shvuah. Why? Because if we go with the idea, we'll say, what's shav? Shav is nishpa l'shanos es hayadua, right? That's what it is, right? Shav is nishpa l'shanos es hayadua, right? It's fine, I can use this. Shav is nishpa l'shanos es hayadua, right? That's what shav does. got my microphone caught over here. Shav is right? So what am I doing? I swear that this sefer is a car. Now I will say, so by definition, that is always retrospective, because what I'm swearing about is something is and has been a certain way, and I'm swearing it's differently. So therefore, this is very interesting. So the Gemara says, or Rabbi Avo says, Befer Shibsa Torah, Shvuas Sheker Dumi L'Shav, that a Shvuas Sheker is like a Shvuas Shav. Now I will say, where does the Torah explicitly go ahead and equate a Shvuas Sheker to a Shvuas Shav? So it could very well be from the drush that we just made before that it says shav twice. One shav is for shav, one shav is for sheker. So again, the same way that a shvuas shav is retrospective and you're chayiv malkus, so to a shvuas sheker will also be retrospective and you will be chayiv malkus. That's the drasha. Incredible. So the Gemara says, good. So I'm sorry. Just like a Shvuah Shav is retrospective, right? And your Chayiv Malkus. So to a Shvuah Sheker will be retrospective and your Chayiv Malkus. Incredible. So for both say, what seems to be coming out over here is that halacha l'maisa, we're going with these three categories of shvuos. So what we have over here is Shvuas Sheker Part 1, which is what we call a retrospective shvuah. I swear that I ate, but I didn't eat, or I swear that I will eat, or I did eat, but I didn't eat, whatever case that is, right? Retrospective. That and Chayiv Malkus. Case number two is what we'll call prospective shvuos. I swear that I will eat or I won't eat. Now, interestingly enough, the Rabbi Avo doesn't really title that. What he just says is that you're in violation of Bal Yachel, because that's the type of shua that's mentioned in the context of nedarim. So that's a shua that's like a neder. Just like a neder is prospective, so to this type of shua is prospective as well. Now, is that called shvua sheker? Is that called something else? We'll have to see. But for now, it's just called category 2 shvua. And then category 3 is what we call shvuas shav. What shvua shav? Nishpa l'shanos es hayadua, where you try to go ahead, you swear to change an established, observable truth. And again, halacha l'maisa, interesting enough, as much as shvua in general could fall into the category of lav she'ein bo maisa, it's one of the exceptions to lav she'ein bo maisa rule, that even though normally lav she'ein bo maisa doesn't get malchus, shvuas do get malchus. Incredible. That's Rabbi Avo. Eis Rabbi Avo, Rabbi Avo raises a kasha, shvuah shelo ochal kikarzu, shvuah shelo ochlana, shvuah shelo ochalna va'achla, Eino chayiv ela achas. So let's listen to this case. It's actually very interesting. Again, we're going to talk more about these yisodos in Meretz Hashem as we go on. But just quickly, here's what's happening over here. Actually, just a couple of days from now. I swear I will not eat this loaf. Right? Okay? So we'll say, so again, Rabbi Avo's model, what would we call this? Where does this fall into his model? What is this? This is what we'd call like a category 2 like konam type model. Right, quantum type model, neder type model, a prospective shvua. I swear I will not eat this loaf. And then I'll say, what happens? Then I take another oath. I swear I won't eat it. Then I even take a third oath. Shvua, shlo ochalna. I swear that I won't eat it. So again, whether I'm making 2 oaths, 3 oaths, all on the same loaf. And now what happens? Va'achla. I eat it. What's the halacha? Eino chayiv ela achas. I'm only chayiv once. So we'll say, now why is that? Look at Rashi. Eno chayv ala achas. The ain't shvua chala al shvua. The chayvan the nishbar shvua rishona ahabili shvua shnia lekaimes hamitzvah. Pneumasis pater. So this is actually very interesting. The halachas we're going to talk about this. Ain't shvua chala al shvua. One shvua cannot devolve upon another shvua. We'll discuss why that is. So once you take the first oath, then that's it. The loaf is prohibited. Or obligated, whichever case you want to frame it as. And I will say, ultimately, we're going to see that if you swear to perform a mitzvah, let's say, I swear to put on tefillin today, such a shavua is meaningless. Why? Because since I'm already obligated to do so, to take a shavua to do something that you're already obligated to do is a meaningless shavua. So therefore, the first time I swear, right, to go ahead and not eat that loaf, I am now commanded, so to speak, not to eat that loaf. And therefore, any subsequent shvuah does not devolve upon me. So the Gemara says, back to the Gemara, Zohi shvuas bito shechayav al zadona makus v'ashigasa carbon olav yored. This is the perfect example of a Shevuos Bitoy, right? A declarative Shevuah. Declarative Shevuah, where if you violate this Shevuah intentionally, you'll get Malchus, and if you go ahead and violate the Shevuah unintentionally, you will have to bring a carbon olav yored. That's it. So if you notice, by the way, what's happening over here, so the Gemara over here is giving like the paradigmatic example of a Shevuos Bitoy. Interestingly enough, what is the paradigmatic example? Is a prospective Shevuah. So what do you see from here? Zohi lemi'utei mai. When it says this is the paradigm, what is it coming to exclude? So my love lemi'utei achalti v'lo achalti delo lucky. First part line at the bottom, it must be coming to exclude ultimately again a retrospective Shevuah, where if you were to make this Shevuah intentionally violated, you wouldn't get Malchus. So what do you see from here? That a retrospective Shevuah is not chayiv Malchus, conscious to what we just said before. Where it says, no. Lo lemi'utei achalti v'lo achalti mi karban. No, what it means to say is actually that a retrospective Shevuah, if unintentionally violated, is not subject to a carbon. So the Gemara says, Zohi dal shigagasa carbon olav yored. It's only a prospective Shevuah that if you accidentally violate it, you're chayv a carbon. Aval achalti v'lo achalti lo. But if you accidentally make a false retrospective Shevuah, you are not chayv a carbon. Intentionally, you're chayv malchus. Unintentionally exempt from a carbon. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, and this reflects the Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar, Eino chayiv ella al ha'asid lavo. Rabbi Shmuel holds you are only chayiv a carbon for a prospective Shevuah. Ava milka lucky. However, again, as much as you're not chayiv a carbon for anything other than a prospective Shevuah, if you violate the retrospective Shevuah, you will be chayiv malchus. This is Rabbi Shmuel. To which the Gemara says, here's the problem. Ema seifa. Look at the end of that brayso. Zohi shvuas shav shechayaven al zadona malchus val shigagasa pater. Right? The brayso says this is the example of a shvuas shav. Now, also remember again. Let's assume over here that with the shav we're going ahead and operating with our basic definition that we saw before. This is the example of a shvuas shav shechayaven, where if you violate it, if you intentionally make a shvuas shav, you get malchus, and for a shogeg you're pater. There's no carbon olav yored by a shvuah shav. Zohi lemi'utei mai. What is this coming to exclude? My love lemi'utei achalti v'lo achalti delo lucky. It's coming to exclude ultimately a retrospective shvuah that you don't get malchus. To which the Gemara says, "Lo zohi da'al shigagasa pater me carbon." No, what it means is to say this is a case where if you do it b'shogeg, you're part on a carbon. Ava achalti v'lo achalti, but in a case ultimately again a retrospective shvuah, al shigagasa chayiv carbon. Ultimately, even for accidental violation, you will be chayiv a carbon. Rabbi Akiva hid mechayiv l'shavar kilahaba. Shabbos says, remember again, this is an ongoing machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel about whether or not one is chayiv for retrospective Shevuos. Rabbi Shmuel says you're not. Rabbi Akiva says you are. Gemara says, 1 second, here's the problem. Ha'amrit reish Rabbi Shmuel. Gemara says, Ha'amrit reish Rabbi Shmuel. So now based on this, you just said before that the reisha reflects the Rabbi Shmuel. So the Gemara says, reish Rabbi Shmuel v'seif Rabbi Akiva? And again, we never like doing that, right? We never like attributing the reisha and sefer to two different opinions. The Gemara says, no, not a problem. Kulu Rabbi Akiva. In reality, both the reisha and the sefer Rabbi Akiva. The reisha lav lemi'uti achalti v'lo achalti mi carbon. The reisha is not coming to exclude a retrospective shua from carbon. Ella lemi'ute ochal v'lo achal mi malchus. It's coming to exclude ultimately again the case of ochal and I didn't eat from the case of malchus. Aval carbon mechayiv, but ultimately there will still be carbonic liability. Umayshna. So why the difference? In other words, why the distinction between the two cases? Mistabra because it makes sense if we're dealing with a prospective shua, then it should come to exclude a case of prospective shua from liability. Does it make sense that if we're talking about again a prospective shua, that we're coming to go ahead and exclude something retrospective? That doesn't make sense. Okay, so we'll say, so what are we left with over here? So what we're left with over here, we'll say, it's a great question. What we're left with over here, we'll say, is still struggling to figure out our Shevuah categories, right? Here's what I do know, right? What I do know right now is that I have essentially two different categories. I have Shevuos Sheker and Shevuos Shav. What I don't know is what exactly falls into these categories. Now, it seems to be, if we operate based on the last model, so Rabbi Avo's model, so what I have over here is as follows. So in Rabbi Avo's model is Shevuos Shav is Nishba L'Shanos Es Hayadua. I'm trying to change something that is an objectively visible and knowable fact. A man is a woman is a man, a book is a car. You just can't do that. That's called Shevuos Shav. What is sheker? See, interestingly enough, in Rabbi Avo's model, he has a retrospective shvuah, is sheker. I swear that I ate the loaf, but I didn't eat the loaf. That's a Shevuos sheker, right? Prospective shvuah, interestingly enough, he learns out from the category ultimately of nidarim. So what is that? Where does prospective false oath live? Is that called the Shevuos sheker? Is that called something else? From Rabbi Avo, it's not immediately clear. But those are our three categories: Shevuos shav, nishbal shanas sayadua, Shevuos sheker, retrospective false oath. There is also a prohibition to make a prospective false oath. Is that called Shevuos sheker? Is that called something else? That's still lingering. Again, we're going to get to the Rambam. I mean, not today, but we'll see in Meretz Hashem how all of these categories drop. We'll see it all. It'll all become clear. Literally, again, just feelings of the Rambam. Say bye lahu. Actually, we'll say, you know what? Let's actually do this right now. Let's do it right now. Let me show you the Rambam, right? Because this is very important to get clarity on this. So this is the Rambam, Perek Aleph of Hilchos Shevuos. Here it is. So actually, it happens to be, maybe I'll send it out on the chat, because it happens to be a beautiful, beautiful read and kind of allows everything to really settle for ourselves. So Rashi says as follows. The Rambam says as follows. First of all, the Rambam gets into some definitions of Shevuos Bitui, which we're not going to get into right now because we'll do a little bit later on. But here's what I want to point out to you. The Rambam says like this. Nishpa, this is Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel. Nishpa akas mi arba machlokes elu vehechlef kigon shenishpa shelo yochal va'achal o sheyochal v'lo achal o sheachalti v'hula achal shelo achalti va'achal harei zu shvuas sheker. So Rambam says definition of shvuas sheker is you lie, whether you're lying prospectively or you're lying retrospectively. That is called a Shevuos sheker. So I swear that I ate the loaf, but I didn't eat the loaf, right? Or I swear that I will eat the loaf, but I didn't eat the loaf. It doesn't make a difference to the Rambam. So retrospectively, prospectively, if you're lying, that is called a Shevuos sheker. V'al zek yotzebo ne'emar lo shav b'shil sheker v'nishpa l'sheker b'mezid loke. If you lie intentionally, you get malchus. If you lie unintentionally, you make a mistake, b'shogeg, maybe carbon ola v'yoreit, shene'emar v'nela mimenu v'hu yadav ashem. So we'll say, here it is, halacha l'maisa. Anytime you're lying, whether you're lying retrospectively or you're lying prospectively, that is called Shevuos sheker. Intentional violation of it gives you malchus. Unintentional is carbon ola v'yored. What's a Shevuos shav? Halacha dal in Rambam. The Rambam writes, he says, Shevuos shav nechlekes la'arba machlokos ha'achos shenishpa al davar hayadua she'eno kain. So number one is you swear about something that is known, objectively known truth, and you swear to the contrary. Keitzad kigon shenishpa ala ish shu isha. Bal isha shu ish, bal amud shel shayish shu shel zav, v'chein kiyotze bazeh. So Rambam adopts our approach as well, or the Gemara's approach as well, that halacha l'maisa, again, anytime you have something that is an objectively known truth, and you swear to the contrary, that is called a Shevuos shav. So both says, now we have it definitionally, there's only two categories. Right? Halacha l'maisa, nishbal shanas sayadua, Shevuos shav. Anytime you lie, whether you're lying retrospectively or it turns out prospectively, halacha l'maisa Shevuos sheker, intentional violation of Shevuos sheker, malchus, unintentional violation of Shevuos sheker, carbon ola v'yoretz. That's what I'm both say. A lot more here, but for now at least it gives us our categorical clarity. Incredible. All right, so back to the Gemara. All right, you know what I'm saying? Let's stop over here. Back to the Gemara and stop over here. Okay, we'll say we're fine. We're absolutely on target. We have to get in that Rambam, end off the day with clarity. Shkayach, everyone will pick up here tomorrow. More exciting sugyas ahead. Have a great day, everyone. Bennett, your mother's neshama shav and aliyah.